The text arrived while I was adjusting the final lights. Do not come tonight. The Whitmores think your presence could complicate the room. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen and watched my own reflection tremble across the black glass. Around me, the gallery shimmered like a polished jewel beside the Savannah River. White walls glowed under soft amber light. Glass frames caught the evening sun and broke it into thin ribbons across the floor. Every painting had been hung to breathe. Every spotlight had been angled by my hand. Every guest on the private list had been called, confirmed, and carefully placed like a piece on a board I knew better than anyone. Then my father sent his message. Juliet needs a polished crowd, not tension. Not tension. I stood in the center of a room I had built from contracts, favors, unpaid hours, and my own reputation, and suddenly understood that in my family, I was still not a daughter. Not really. I was scaffolding. Useful while the house was rising. Unwelcome once the chandeliers were lit. I lowered the phone very slowly. My chest felt tight, but not in the way tears begin. It felt colder than that. Cleaner. Like a blade being pulled from water. My younger sister, Juliet Carter, had always been the one people turned toward. At 27, she moved through a room the way silk moves through fingers, soft and expensive and impossible not to notice. She painted moody coastal landscapes that made strangers say brave things about depth and longing. Our mother adored that. Our father fed it. They called her gifted, luminous, born for beautiful things. They called me dependable. I was 31, and dependable had become the family word for invisible. When Juliet needed a portfolio, I hired the photographer. When she needed a curator to glance at her work, I made the call. When her first student showcase looked amateur and thin, I stayed up 3 nights rewriting the layout, renting cleaner frames, and finding a florist willing to work for half her rate because I had once saved her launch party from disaster. When my parents nearly drowned in debt after a failed boutique investment, I used my contacts to rebuild their social standing one event at a time. I turned embarrassment into elegance so smoothly that even they forgot who had saved them. Tonight was supposed to be Juliet's grand arrival. Her first real gallery opening. Her first step into the world of donors, critics, collectors, and old money. The Whitmores, Adrian's family, had taken interest. That alone had turned my mother feverish with ambition. She wanted the room flawless. The guest list impeccable. The story clean. And apparently I was the stain. I thought of Juliet in the dressing room mirror, probably smoothing one careful hand over ivory fabric, telling herself this was only temporary. That I would understand. That I always understood. I thought of my mother, chin lifted, voice calm, pretending this exclusion was strategy, not betrayal. I thought of my father, who would rather cut me out of the frame than explain to wealthy people that the woman who built the evening was not decorative enough to display beside it. My phone rang. Mother. I let it ring until the sound died. Then I opened my laptop. The screen lit my face in the dim gold room. One folder after another bloomed before me. Venue lease under my production company. Insurance writer routed through my agency. Press access list managed through my account. Collector confirmations, transport authorizations, lighting diagrams, catering approvals, installation notes. My name was everywhere they had never bothered to look. A strange stillness settled over me as I scrolled. The hurt was still there, deep and hot and humiliating, but something larger was rising through it now. Not rage. Not yet. Recognition. They had mistaken my silence for powerlessness. They had confused the woman behind the curtain with someone who had no claim to the stage. But I knew better. I knew what held this glittering night upright. I knew whose hands had made it breathe. Outside, the river darkened under the falling evening. Inside, the paintings waited beneath their perfect lights. And for the first time all day, I was no longer thinking like a sister. I was thinking like the woman who owned the room. By the next morning, my phone looked like a battlefield. Missed calls from my mother. 2 clipped messages from my father. One soft, careful voicemail from Juliet that said my name the way people touch cracked glass, as if tenderness might erase the fracture. I listened to none of them at first. I sat at my kitchen counter with a cup of coffee gone cold between my hands and watched the pale savannah light climb the walls inch by inch. The city was waking gently. Inside me, something harsher had already awakened. People love to talk about betrayal as if it arrives like thunder, loud and impossible to ignore. That is not how it happened in my family. In my family, betrayal came dressed as gratitude. It smiled. It kissed your cheek. It called you the strong one. The capable one. The one who did not need much. It set heavier and heavier things into your arms, then praised you for never dropping them. Juliet had been painted golden since childhood. Even before her canvases, there was always something arranged around her. Better dresses. Softer excuses. More room for mistakes. If she forgot a deadline, she was overwhelmed. If I fixed it quietly behind her, I was efficient. If she charmed a room, she was magnetic. If I built the room she charmed, I was organized. My mother loved to say we each had our gifts. Juliet was the face. I was the structure. She said it like wisdom. She meant it like a sentence. I remembered Juliet at 19, trembling before her first university showcase, convinced the whole thing looked provincial and small. The frames were cheap. The catalog was a mess. Her artist statement sounded like a diary entry written in a hurry. She cried in the hallway outside the studio bathroom while our mother fussed uselessly about mascara and our father muttered that maybe she simply was not ready. I fixed everything in 48 hours. I rewrote her statement until it breathed. I called a printer I knew from a luxury launch in Charleston and begged for a rush favor. I borrowed cleaner frames from a client staging house. I replaced the overhead glare with borrowed lamps and warm angles that made her paintings look expensive, thoughtful, inevitable. The night of the showcase, people walked in and lowered their voices. That is how I knew I had done it right. They believed they were in the presence of something real. Juliet won praise. My parents cried. No one asked who had stayed up through dawn with splinters in her fingers and shipping receipts spread across the floor. That became the rhythm of our lives. When my parents sank money into a boutique venture that collapsed in under a year, it was my network that saved them from public humiliation. I built events that put them back in rooms where people mattered. I turned whispers into invitations. I polished their name until it gleamed again. My father took the credit with the solemn confidence of a man who had convinced himself rescue was his birthright. My mother called me her miracle in private and her practical daughter in public. Then Adrian Whitmore entered Juliet's life, and the temperature changed. The Whitmores were old money wrapped in perfect manners. Their compliments came trimmed with hierarchy. Their silences said more than most people's insults. At the first dinner in their riverfront home, Adrian's mother asked me what I did, and when I explained that I produced private art events and brand launches, she smiled with a cool, almost pitying elegance. How lovely, she said. You make talented people appear effortless. My mother laughed as if it were charming. My father lifted his glass. Juliet looked down at her plate. I remember the exact moment something shifted in me then. Not because of the insult itself, but because no one corrected it. Not one person at that table said Naomi is the reason half the people in this city trust our family name. Not one person said she does not decorate rooms. She commands them. That silence told the truth more clearly than any confession could. Now, sitting alone in my kitchen, I finally let myself see the full shape of it. They did not just want my help. They wanted my labor without my presence. My influence without my shadow. My power, stripped of my personhood. My phone lit again. This time it was Juliet. I stared at her name until the screen went dark, then whispered into the quiet room, as if she could somehow hear me through the silence between us. You needed my hands. You just never wanted my name beside yours. I did not cry after Juliet's call. I did something far more dangerous. I got organized. The morning air in my apartment felt unnaturally still, as if even the walls were waiting to see what kind of woman I would become by noon. On the dining table, my laptop sat open beside a yellow legal pad covered in names, account numbers, contract dates, and handwritten arrows connecting one fragile piece of Juliet's glittering opening to the next. Under normal light, it might have looked like planning. In the cold clarity of that morning, it looked like anatomy. I was staring at the skeleton of the entire event. And every major bone belonged to me. I began with the gallery lease. The contract had been signed through my production company because the owner trusted my reputation, not my family's promises. Then the insurance rider for the paintings. Then the transport authorization for the final 3 canvases still being held in climate storage. Then the collector preview list, the press confirmations, the lighting crew, the floral installation, the champagne service for the private donor's hour. Every polished detail my mother liked to call effortless had passed through my hands first. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt something quieter and heavier. Grief has strange timing. Mine arrived not when they excluded me, but when I realized how carefully I had built a world for people who were embarrassed to admit I was the architect. My phone vibrated again and again across the wood, each call skimming the surface like a stone over water. Mother. Father. Mother again. Then a text from Juliet. Please do not do anything dramatic. Adrian's family is already asking questions. I read it twice and laughed once, a low sound that startled even me. Dramatic. As if I were the storm, not the one finally stepping out of the rain. I typed one sentence back. So I was good enough to build the room, just not stand in it. She did not answer. That was enough. I opened a new email and changed voices inside myself. Daughter disappeared. Sister went silent. Producer took the chair. To the gallery manager, I wrote that because the principal producer had been explicitly removed from the event by the client family, all responsibilities under my company's name would be suspended pending immediate contractual review. To the insurance broker, I requested formal separation of liability. To the lighting team, I instructed them to pause load-in on all enhancements beyond the base package until revised authorization was received. To catering, I informed them that the collector tier upgrade had not been cleared for release. To my assistant, Mara, I said only this: pull every file tied to Carter opening and move our premium assets to the Loron watch launch next week. Her reply came less than a minute later. Are you sure? I looked around. The apartment. At the soft gray walls. At the coffee gone untouched. At my reflection in the dark window, straight-backed and bloodless and suddenly very hard to underestimate. Yes, I wrote. I am finally sure. The first call from my father came seconds later. Naomi, whatever tantrum this is, stop now. His voice was clipped, sharp with the kind of authority men use when they realize control is slipping and hope volume will do the work discipline no longer can. This is not a tantrum, I said. It is a withdrawal. You are hurting your sister. No, I said, each word landing flat and clean. I am removing what was mine from people who wanted the benefit without the burden. He went silent. For one brief second, I could hear him breathing. I imagined him standing in his study with one hand on his hip, jaw tight, trying to decide whether anger or guilt would move me faster. Then my mother took the phone. Sweetheart, please do not let emotion ruin Juliet's future. That word again. Emotion. As if what I was doing had not been built from contracts, signatures, liability, and fact. As if their cruelty was strategy and my response was hysteria. I closed my eyes. You taught me exactly how this family works, I said softly. I just finally learned the lesson. When the call ended, the apartment returned to silence. Outside, somewhere beyond the window, Savannah moved through another shining day. Cars rolled past. Doors opened. People carried flowers, coffee, secrets. The world looked unchanged. But on my screen, one confirmation after another began to arrive. Coverage paused, access revoked, loadout rescheduled, collector tier pending, press hold in place. I watched the messages stack up, neat and devastating. I had not destroyed Juliet's opening. I had simply taken back my hands. By late afternoon, the city looked drenched in gold, but Juliet's opening had already begun to rot from the inside. I knew it before I even stepped out of the car. The original gallery, the one I had secured months earlier, stood bright and elegant near the river, its tall glass front reflecting the dusky sky like a sheet of polished fire. But Juliet's event was no longer there. Mara had sent me the new location an hour before, along with 3 words that felt almost tender in their cruelty. This is bad. The replacement venue sat behind a boutique hotel on a narrower side street, hidden from the evening promenade, tucked between a restaurant patio and a private courtyard where string lights sagged above wrought iron chairs. It was smaller. Lower ceilings. Thinner walls. The kind of room that tried to look intimate because it could never afford grandeur. I stood outside for a moment, one hand on the strap of my bag, listening to the muffled pulse of strained music behind the doors. Laughter flickered inside, brittle and uneven. Glasses clinked too loudly. Someone was already trying too hard. Then I walked in. The difference hit me like a slap. The lighting was wrong first. Too harsh. Too white. It flattened Juliet's paintings and drained them of mood, exposing every insecure brushstroke I had once softened with careful placement and shadow. The floral arrangements were smaller and crowded the entry table instead of floating through the room with grace. The wine was cheap enough to smell sharp from the doorway. One canvas hung slightly crooked. Another had been placed too close to the catering station, where servers kept brushing past it with tight, apologetic smiles. No one in the room looked relaxed. They looked assembled. My mother saw me first. Her face changed in stages. Relief. Shock. Fury. Naomi, she hissed, crossing the room with her smile still pinned desperately in place for the guests. What are you doing here? I held her gaze. Watching. Her nostrils flared. This is not the time. No, I said quietly. It was never the time. That was always the problem. Across the room, my father had gone pale with the particular anger of a man who realizes the disaster he blamed on someone else has now taken physical form in front of witnesses. He started toward me, but before he could reach me, the room shifted. Juliet had appeared. She stood near the center display wall in a white silk dress that clung to her like a final performance. Under the lights, her face looked beautiful in the way porcelain looks beautiful just before it cracks. Adrian stood a few feet behind her, one hand at his side, his jaw tight enough to splinter. The conversations around us began to thin. Heads turned. Voices dropped. Wealthy people have a gift for sensing humiliation before a word is spoken. Juliet stared at me from across the room. Her expression flickered so fast I could read every layer of it. Hurt. Panic. Anger. Shame. And beneath all of it, the one truth she had spent years avoiding. Need. She stepped toward the microphone stand set beside the central pedestal and wrapped her fingers around it as if it might keep her upright. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began, and her voice trembled only once. This evening means everything to me and to everyone who believed in my work. A man near the collector table interrupted with the polished bluntness of someone too rich to fear awkwardness. Then why was the venue changed at the last minute? The room went still. Another voice followed, a woman from one of the local arts publications. I heard the press preview was delayed because production clearance disappeared. Is that true? My mother made a strangled sound. My father started forward again. Adrian did not move. Juliet looked at me. Not at the guests. Not at Adrian. At me. And in front of that entire room, with her family name hanging around her neck like jewelry bought on credit, she asked the question she should have asked long before that night. Why are you here? I could have lied. I could have softened it. I could have saved what little dignity was still standing. Instead, I told the truth. I came to see what my work looked like after you removed me from the picture. You could feel the sentence pass through the room. Slow. Sharp. Irreversible. My father reached me then, voice low and lethal. Do not do this here. I turned to him. Where else would you prefer the truth, Dad? In private, where I can be useful again. My mother's smile finally broke. Naomi, enough. Enough, I repeated, and for the first time in my life, the word belonged to me. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I simply said what the room was already beginning to understand. The gallery lease had been under my company. The insurance writer had been routed through my agency. The collector preview had been built through my contacts. The premium lighting package, the private donor service, the press coordination, the transport chain, all of it had been arranged by me, funded in part by me, and trusted because my name was attached to it. When I was told I would embarrass the room by standing inside it, I removed what was mine. A silence followed so deep it seemed to bend the air. Then Adrian spoke. I told them not to do it. Every head turned. His voice was low, strained, but clear. He looked at Juliet when he said the next part, and whatever tenderness he had walked into the evening with was gone. I told all of them that cutting Naomi out was cruel, short-sighted, and dishonest. But they said her presence would create the wrong impression for my family. The wrong impression. There it was. Naked at last. My mother looked as if someone had struck her across the face. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came. Juliet's lips parted, then trembled. The microphone in her hand lowered an inch. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and for one brief aching second I saw not the polished artist, not the golden child, not the woman who let them erase me. I saw a frightened girl standing in a room too expensive for honesty, realizing too late what honesty costs. I was your sister, I said, my voice steady as stone. Not your silent infrastructure. Juliet flinched as though I had touched a bruise no one else could see. Then I stepped back. No screaming. No scene. No shattered glasses. Just truth, standing in the middle of the room where they had tried so hard to keep me invisible. And because truth is heavier than spectacle, it landed harder than any outburst ever could. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, no one called my name. No one dared. The music had stopped. The room had gone breathless. And somewhere in that suffocating hush, the evening finally became what it had always been beneath the silk and flowers and borrowed prestige. A collapse. The night air outside felt colder than it should have. I stepped out into the narrow courtyard behind the venue, and for the first time all evening, there was no music, no perfume, no polished laughter trying to hide panic. Only the distant hush of the river, the soft clink of glass somewhere beyond the wall, and the fierce hammering of my own pulse beginning, finally, to slow. My hands were trembling. Not from fear. Not anymore. From release. I pressed my palm against the cool iron railing and looked up at the darkening savannah sky. All night, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought there would be triumph in it. Vindication. Some bright, savage satisfaction. But standing there with the truth still vibrating in the air behind me, what I felt was quieter than victory and heavier than anger. I felt grief for the woman I had been in that family. The one who arrived early and left late. The one who solved things before anyone else noticed they were broken. The one who translated chaos into elegance, dead into dignity, humiliation into something that could still pass under chandelier light. I had spent years believing love could be earned through usefulness. That if I held enough weight for everyone, one day they would stop treating me like the floor beneath their feet and finally see me standing there. They had seen me. They had simply chosen not to care. The back door opened behind me with a sharp metallic sigh. Mara stepped out first, heels clicking against stone, her face flushed with disbelief and admiration in equal measure. She stopped beside me, folded her arms, and let out a slow breath. Well, she said softly, they cannot put that back in the box. I gave a tired laugh, one that broke in the middle. No, I said. They cannot. Inside, voices were still rising and falling in confused waves. A room trying to decide whether scandal had ruined the evening or finally told the truth about it. A few seconds later, the door opened again. Juliet. She stood in the threshold as if she no longer belonged to either world, neither the glowing room behind her nor the quiet dark where I stood. Up close, she looked younger than she had all night. Smaller. Her mascara had blurred at the corners. One earring was missing. The silk of her dress still caught the light, but the woman inside it had come undone. Mara looked at me, read the moment, and slipped away without a word. Juliet walked toward me slowly, each step stripped of performance. I did not know what to expect from her. Anger. Accusation. Another plea wrapped in entitlement. But when she finally spoke, her voice was almost unrecognizable. I knew it was wrong. The words were barely above a whisper. I kept my eyes on the river beyond the courtyard wall. That did not stop you. She flinched. No, she said. It did not. Silence settled between us, deep and raw. Not the old silence our family specialized in, the kind that buried truth under manners. This one was different. This one bled. She drew in a shaky breath. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself once the opening was over, I would fix it with you. I thought if I just got through tonight, everything would settle down and I could explain. I turned then and looked at her fully. Explain what, Juliet? That I should be grateful you planned to apologize after using my name, my work, my contacts, and my money to cross a room you did not build. Her mouth trembled. Tears slipped free, sudden and helpless. I was scared, she said. Adrian's family, mom, dad, all of it. They kept saying this was bigger than feelings. Bigger than old wounds. They said one wrong impression could close doors for me forever. I nodded once, slowly. And so you decided I should be the one left outside the door. She covered her mouth with her hand, and for a moment she looked so shattered that a softer version of me would have rushed to steady her. That woman was gone now. I did not hate my sister. I loved her enough to stop lying to both of us. What hurt most, I said quietly, was never the work. It was the certainty. All of you were certain I would take it. That I would understand. That I would swallow it because I am the strong one. The practical one. The one who survives. Juliet lowered her hand. Her face was wet, stripped bare. I do not know how to fix this. You do not fix this in one night, I said. You tell the truth. Repeatedly. You stop letting them turn cruelty into strategy. You stop calling my pain a complication. And if you want me in your life, then it starts there. Not with excuses. Not with performance. With truth. She nodded through tears, small and broken and real. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, "Do you think there is any way back?" I let the question rest in the night air before answering. Back to what? She looked down. Exactly, I said. The door behind her opened again. But neither of us turned. Somewhere inside, the evening was still collapsing under the weight of what had been said. Let it. Some things need to fall apart before anyone stops worshipping the ruins. A few weeks later, I stood in the original riverfront gallery beneath a clean white credit wall that carried my company name exactly where it belonged. No shadows. No omissions. No borrowed glory. I was producing a private luxury launch for a client who had introduced me, without hesitation, as the woman who made impossible rooms happen. This time, when the lights rose, I stayed in the room. Juliet sent me a message that night. A photo of a therapist's waiting area. 2 paper cups of untouched tea. Her caption was short. I started. I looked at the image for a long time before replying. Keep going. Then I locked my phone and stood for a moment in the golden hush of the gallery I had once lost and finally reclaimed, not because someone gave it back, but because I stopped begging to be included in places I had the power to build myself. If you have ever been the person who carried everyone else and got treated like part of the furniture, tell me where you would have drawn the line. And if stories like this stay with you, comment, like, and subscribe to Still Waters Payback for more slow burns, sharp reckonings, and the kind of justice that arrives without raising its voice.